Speaksies.
Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 140 of Origin of Speaksies. My name is Scott, and as always, I'm joined with my good friend Steve. And I was thinking about the topic we're doing today, and it's the first one is boycott.
Boycott.
So usually we start kind of light. Actually, I'd say our show is pretty light in general.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, somehow back to back, Hitler came up, but
Yeah.
even then, I feel like for as much talking as we did about Hitler, things, as compared to what other things we could be talking about, is pretty light. Right now, there's a war going on as we record this, Russia and Ukraine, and I had to bring it up. Not that I want to bring up the war.
Right.
We're not going to sit here and talk about it unless you want to.
No. I'm still focused on being an expert on new viruses, so I'm not ready to transition my knowledge to international affairs. So right now, I'm just going to still be amateur virologist.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yep. But I had to bring it up because we're doing a show on boycott, and right now, a lot of people are boycotting Russia. I wanted to bring that up, that it's something we do for different reasons. I think in some ways boycotting feels like a cousin of our new cancel culture thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a similarity there. We're going to talk a little bit about what works, what has worked in boycotts and what has not worked, or I should say what boycotts have worked and what haven't. They don't always do anything. And so the boycotting Russia thing, some of it may help, but a lot of it isn't really going to help anything. Like, for example, there's really no point in trying to, I shouldn't say there's no point.
Right.
If you want to dump Russian vodka out, if you want to not buy or sell Russian vodka, that's symbolically okay. The problem is, if you actually look into it, there are numerous articles out there. Most of even the Russian vodka that we drink, or the stuff that we think is Russian, like Stoli and what's another one? The Smirnoff. Actually, we either make it here or it comes from someone else. So I didn't pull this out, but the people at Stoli had to. It's amazing. Like, they had to put out this statement where they're like, "We have always stood with the oppressed," and it's like, dude, settle down. You're Stoli, but they're getting hurt.
I wonder if they called the same people that the Corona Beer Company had to call a couple of years ago. There's some weird PR firm to pull them out of an international incident that's occurring.
That's hilarious. Yeah, it's the same thing. Anyway, so that's going on right now. Some sports teams from Russia are getting boycotted, in that they're not, they're not able to play in their league. I mean, I'm fine with it because, boo for Russia.
Yeah.
But what does boycott mean? So from dictionary.com, when it's used as a verb, it's to combine. So to combine with others in abstaining from or preventing dealings with, as a means of intimidation or coercion, to boycott a store, to abstain from buying or using something, or to boycott foreign products. Now, you may be wondering, what is the connection between the other one that I'm doing today, hillbilly, and the one I'm doing now, which is boycott, what we're talking about now? And believe it or not, I'll go ahead and tell you, this is our St. Patrick's Day episode. This is our Irish episode, and it'll all come together.
I thought I smelled a potato.
Yeah. So unlike Steve, who I think has claimed every ethnic origin out there.
I got Irish out there too.
Yeah, see, there you go.
German, Irish, Swedish, but mostly Belgian, Mongolian.
Yeah. To be clear, I understand you also claim Irish. I'm saying you claim a lot, and I pretty much only can claim Scotch Irish, although I haven't done this 23andMe, so some weird stuff could come up, but I'm not trying to get my DNA out in the database. You just never know.
I like my DNA out there the traditional way.
Touche. So this is one that is actually very clear cut as to what the origin is. So the way I realized this would be a good one to do, and actually it's one that's been on my radar for a little while, is again, I always look to see, does Worldwide Words have an entry? Because if it's interesting, or it's going to be in his database, and they did. So I'm going to use Worldwide Words here. I'm also going to use another article, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But someone wrote into Michael Quinion and asked the question, saying, I searched for the word boycott on your site, couldn't find anything. A television program recently said that it was about the Revolutionary War and the boycott of British taxes. So he pretty much said no to that. Mm-hmm. And normally I do just use Worldwide Words, but since we're celebrating the Irish today, I will use, and St. Patty's Day, I will use an article on irishcentral.com for the bulk of my research today. And this is going to be one too, where it's really I'm just going to tell a little story.
I like it.
It's not going to be too, on this day in 1941.
The details are all kind of fuzzy anyway, if it's the Irish times.
You know what? Cheers. And you know what? I do have a little Irish whiskey in here. This ain't tea. Felt appropriate. Also, I've had a super stressful day and realized that by the way, I soothe myself. Like when I'm trying to get over stress, I pick music that makes me feel relaxed. And for some reason today, I listened to the Wallflowers Bringing Down the Horse like 3 times. I don't know if you've heard that lately, but it did it for me.
Well, good.
Yeah.
It did its job.
Thought I would share, but I'll have some Irish whiskey also. So let me tell you a story. In the late 1800s, a British captain by the name of Charles Boycott was the land agent of an absentee landlord called Lord Erne in County Mayo, Ireland. Now, this was around the time that something called the Irish Land Wars was going on. Basically, the Irish were renting their land from the British, as was the case with a lot of that region, obviously.
Right.
And so in 1880, after a year of bad harvests, Lord Erne, the absentee landlord, offered his tenants a 10% reduction in their rent, which he felt was generous. The Irish people did not agree. The potatoes weren't growing. And they countered and said, and they protested and said, we want 25%, off of our rent. Lord Erne said no. And he sent his agent, this Charles Boycott, to evict them all, evict anyone that didn't pay. So here's where it gets interesting. Right before this happened, a gentleman by the name, another Charles, named Charles Stewart, he was a member of the Irish Land League, and his name was Charles Stewart Parnell. He proposed an idea for how to deal with landlords and agents in case something like this came up. So this wasn't actually a response to what happened, but they were already, he's in something called the Irish Land League. They're talking about, what are we going to do with this, man? We're under the thumb of these guys. But he said, let's try to do something peaceful instead of resorting to violence. And he said, let's ostracize this guy. So what happened was everyone in the area, the region of the Mayo County, stopped working with this guy at all. So if Boycott was to go to get his shoe fixed, they would ignore him. If the most crushing blow to him was all of the farm hands that he had on this land quit working. And even though they were, and I think this is sometimes part of a boycott too, even though they were also it was going to hurt them, right? They're not getting paid. They quit. They got to figure something out. But everyone banded together. Even the postman didn't deliver his mail. And so Boycott ended up having to hire men from outside of the area to come work his fields. It was very expensive. He ended up with a huge financial loss. No violence occurred, but the boycott was working. So it worked. And I won't go into the history of everything that happened after that because it's irrelevant to this, but obviously boycott came from Charles Boycott. And I read on the Irish Central or whatever it was article, they called this like one of the first viral memes kind of, because this name boycott just spread everywhere and people got this idea, so it doesn't have any sort of etymology in Scottish or Gaelic or any of that stuff. It's just this guy's last name, but it sounds great as a word. It's got a nice buoyancy to a boycott. We're going to boycott. It can be used. It feels like a good verb. It feels like a good action verb to use. And so within weeks, the boycott name was everywhere. So James Redpath of the New York Tribune was the first person to use the word in the international press very shortly after the incident. And the Times used the term to describe an organized isolation in November of 1880. By 1881, the boycott was now being used to describe things figuratively, with one article in The Spectator describing how nature had, quote, boycotted London from Kew to Mile End. So this thing got really put into the lexicon very quickly. I mean, normally we see these things take time and we go, oh my gosh, over hundreds of years we've developed. But I guess when it's somebody's name, it just, the name happens to be boycott, and it was successful and it was inspiring, I'm sure, to other people in the same spot. And so that is the story of where boycott came from. It came from the Irish, who, had enough. They didn't want to get violent, and they did that. So
I think that's a very interesting story. A couple of things stand out to me in that. One of them is that when we often do new slang, we'll give something a thumbs down when it's a new word that replaces a word that's already in the lexicon and generally already doing its job. What I like about boycott is maybe one of the reasons that it took off so quickly is there wasn't, I think, really a word to concisely state what that is. And, it is something that's just, it's easy to say. It's different, but it doesn't sound like a lot of other words. And I think it was able to encapsulate something that was needed. There was a word needed for this.
Yes.
And the fact that it was successful too. And another thing I found really interesting about that is you mentioned how the boycott actually hurt some of the people that were a part of it. So as they did that, it was, they had some skin in the game, and it wasn't just this kind of typical mob thing that we see a lot of times now, that people will consequence-free go on Twitter and defame and demean somebody and try to take their livelihood away from them. And there's no consequence or skin. You could be sitting next to your bottle of hair dye in front of your computer and go ahead and do that. So I like too, that it was interesting that this happened, that it was more than just kind of empty words or rhetoric. There was action, but there was something that also cost the people. They believed so much in it that it cost them.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point about the difference between boycotting now and canceling someone or sitting behind Twitter doing something like that. But I think even in modern times, the idea of a boycott does mean some sort of even small sacrifice. I know that there have been, when I was growing up, there were a lot of things. I knew the word boycott at a young age. It was like, we're not you, because I grew up in charismatic church, and we would jump on boycotts all the time. I remember we couldn't use anything from Procter and Gamble at one point because
they had something hidden in the logo.
Yeah, right. Their logo somehow was tipping off that they were Satanists or something.
Yeah,
but this was
probably a kale leaf.
Yeah, it probably was. It was during the 80s when the whole satanic panic thing has been covered a lot. I heard someone make a comment about the dynamics behind why that came, and it was fascinating, but we won't get into it now. But it was something I'd never thought about before. Just how it kind of filled a void that we have. We need to be afraid of something, kind of like we've got climate change now. But not saying climate change isn't real. Oh no, YouTube. I'm not saying that. Climate change is real.
He did not say ivermectin, so we're safe.
Join us at Rumble, everybody.
Yeah.
If you don't know what we're talking about, and you may notice there wasn't an episode in our feed for episode 139. So if you want to see it, go to Rumble. or just listen. A lot of you just listen, and that's also okay.
Too.
So I'm going to talk about a couple of boycotts that I found. I'm not going to go through a ton. There's like a million. There's like a lot of websites that are like the top 10 boycotts, what worked and what didn't work. I do want to mention a couple that I think are either cool or interesting. Do you remember growing up with the idea of boycott? Have you, or even as an adult, have you ever decided I'm going to boycott something based on some sort of principle or just any reason, I guess?
Yeah. Like you, I grew up in a charismatic church. Actually, that's how we met. And I do remember boycotting a lot of stuff, or at least it being discussed. I'm not sure how active we were. I don't think our family was an economic force to really, dissuade any companies from doing things. And I think it's one of the reasons to give people insight of why we kind of get when we cancel culture and just mobs going after people. We've seen when the other side does it too. It's not pretty, regardless of what side of the fence you're on.
Yeah,
the mob is bad. And I think we agree on that.
By the way, thank God Hamburger Helper never got boycotted when we were growing up.
Well, it might have been a good thing. We need to maybe go back and plant some kale leaves on their covers. So I can't think of anything that I've boycotted. And frankly, I don't have the time. I've just tried to, if it's something extra egregious, and I think, kind of like with cancel culture, I mean, there are circumstances where people should not, some sort of boycott should happen. But if you're taking away someone's livelihood, it needs to be a high bar. Urban legends about satanic logos or, things to the devil in a product description or whatever it was back then, that to me is not the high bar. That's me just kind of the mob going around looking for something a witch to chase or something like that. So trying to think though, if I've had any things that we've boycotted. I don't think so, but I also try just to not hear what any company stand for, because I'm sure if I really got down to the brass tacks or whatever, companies I have to use, or who they've donated to, I don't want to know.
Well, yeah, and so again, with the contrast between cancel culture and boycotting, I think like boycotting is better because you're just not buying something or using something. Cancel culture, you're actively going after like advertisers and things like that. But even boycotting, like you said, it's like, it's almost like separating the music or the artist from the art. I think there's some of that. Now, if there's egregious like human rights violations, we should probably think about doing that, but we don't even do that.
Yeah, I'd like to use the computer, so I have to overlook that.
I have been, what's the word? People have tried to persuade me even recently to boycott certain stores for different, reasons. And I just don't, I'm just like, whatever, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I need my Goya beans. I need my Chick-fil-A. What are you going to do? Let's talk about a couple boycott examples now. One that was really good, and that was the 13 colonies boycotting Great Britain when Great Britain overplayed their hand with the Stamp Act, and colonies did not like that they got into the whole idea of taxation without representation. They boycotted British goods and started terrorizing British. So there's a little violence in this one as well, but
it was also it concluded in a revolution, not in a
that's exactly right,
a storm of tweets.
So that might be the greatest boycott of all time, but it has some stiff competition, which is the Sudanese Civil War sex boycott. Not sure if you're familiar with this one, but there's a professor in the Sudan who decided that a good way to help end the Civil War was for all wives, to abandon sexual relations with their husbands. And by the way, this is not a new idea. The earliest record of this idea is attributed to Greek playwright who's come up a few times recently, Aristophanes, or Aristophanes. That's probably how Bill and Ted would say it. And one of his plays, which I won't butcher, but the tactic of withholding sex was used to end the Peloponnesian War of 404 AC. So was the Sudanese Civil War sex boycott as successful? Maybe, because the war did end 3 years later, and 3 years is a long time, but it had been going on for 19 years before that.
Yeah.
So,
and I do know from friends that I have that there's now a Sudan and a South Sudan. So
beautiful.
maybe it paid off.
Yeah, and to be very clear, I know nothing about Sudanese politics. So if I just said something that's like somehow makes half of Sudan mad, my bad.
Yeah,
My
they'll
bad.
be all right. I'll get on Sudanese Twitter and calm down everybody.
Yeah, or just send a handwritten letter. I'd prefer that. Okay, well, I want to talk a little bit about something else I learned when I was doing research for this one. We're done with boycott. I think we got the history.
Yeah.
Talked a little bit about some boycotts, the pros, the cons, when they've worked and when not. But the boycott being named after a person is called an eponym. So I want to talk about eponyms after Steve does his new slang, which I believe you have something prepared for us, Steve.
Oh, I do have something prepared for you. So before I get into today's new slang, I want to talk about one that was on the table for tonight. I originally was going to do a new slang on a phenomenon known as doom scrolling. But frankly, the origin behind it isn't that great. And it's exactly what it sounds like, of people sitting on their phone and just gouging themselves on the bad news of the day, probably on an application like Twitter. Speaking of social media, please follow Speaksies on Instagram and Twitter, both at Speaksies, preferably Instagram. No one needs to be on Twitter. And one of the things that was interesting, I also didn't want to mention the war. Again, I'm focused on my knowledge of viruses right now, and also periodically saying ivermectin to see how many times I can say it before YouTube bans us for life. But with the recent outbreak of war in the Ukraine with Russia invading, I've noticed a series of ads of just how to deal with your anxiety as you read about this. And these are heavy events, where they're potential. You and I are I'd say fairly knowledgeable about history, not as much as we are with viruses. We know much more about that. But just the idea of, this could be the start of something that's not great. But just all these articles that were, to be clear, not directed at people in the Ukraine. You're having missiles shot at them, but just for, people who are spending too much time on their phone doom scrolling, which to me, that was a pretty disappointing trend. And also to watching a war break out, and everyone's first instinct is to find the other political party they don't like and rub something in their face, both on the left and right, which has been interesting. And I definitely think one side has probably more reason to do this too. But at the same time, that's, there's an international incident with a country invading somebody else. It's not time to, I don't know, rub your opponent's face in it. So I found that pretty disappointing. And I want to go on the record as not liking Russia for forever. I haven't liked Russia since I'm an 80s kid. I've seen communism end at the end of Rocky IV. I've seen it hang around. I remember when Mitt Romney was derided for I think our first Hawaiian president, Barack Obama, said something along the lines of the 80s called, they want their foreign policy back.
The 80s called.
Yeah, but then he did discover, I think he did understand what Russia's threat was in December of 2016. He seemed to pick up on it then. As we know, Russia brought in Donald Trump as a secret agent. Remember, that was the news for a very long time. That wasn't misinformation. But anyway, where was I?
We're going to memory hole that.
Taking shots at other people. So doom scrolling, I have a recommendation for people who are experiencing anxiety. Get off your phone, delete Twitter especially. Maybe stay on Instagram and follow Speaksies at Instagram. But I would say doom scrolling is something, it's something you can take care of without an article from NPR.
I agree.
And now that I'm done with my sermon,
I like
new
it.
slang.
New slang when you notice the stripes.
So as I mentioned, I originally was going to do doom scrolling for my new slang. I think I've summarized it pretty good. And again, no big origin or grand story behind it. So on with something a little happy. This week's new slang is bussin'.
My son uses that a lot.
Well, good. Well, you're going to learn a lot about it. Maybe learn too much about
it. Okay.
So going first to medium.com and their description of bussin'. Bussin' is an adjective to describe something really, really good. Often related to food, but it can also describe other things. It started with a 2019 song by Tay Money that has later been popularized by TikTok users.
Okay, Tay Money. I've never heard of Tay Money.
You're going to learn more about Tay Money as we go on today. So I think a nice succinct definition, see this pretty frequently across the internet. And I think the first thing I like about Bus, before I get into it too much more, is I like the way it sounds. It's a little bit similar, I'd say, to boycott, unless you say it and it just kind of feels good coming out of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of fun to say. A little bit like that's what I'm talking about. Not as good, but it's up
there. I agree.
So continuing on, going to slangit.com and their definition. Slangit defines bussin' as really good. When something is great, people might describe it as bussin'. Primarily used to describe delicious food. It may also refer to other awesome things, such as outstanding fashion choices, cool whips, or slick bars.
I hope my son is not using it for cool whips and slick bars. Wait, did you say sick bars, like as rapping?
Slick bars.
Okay, but I don't think they mean, do they mean like the beach house bar up the street, or do they mean bars like you're dropping bars like a rapper? I guess it could be either, right?
I would hope it's not the beach house or watering hole, especially if your son's using this term a lot. He's a little young to be up there.
Yeah.
But you never know. But slick bars, potentially something for a later date, or something will be edited, as we'll show that you and I are combined over 100 years old, or will be by the end of this.
I don't think clipping that out's going to help, but we'll see.
We can always hope. So one of the ways this was popularized was through TikTok. And it started, was helped popularized by a foodie TikToker named Janelle Roner. So thankfully, you and I have stayed off TikTok pretty much, as far as I can tell. And as much as we do social media on Instagram, especially, we've stayed away from TikTok. And I've never seen a reason to make me change our feeling on that. And this certainly doesn't. So Janelle Roner is a popular foodie TikToker, and she noticed this slang in March of 2021. And on one of her videos, asked what the term meant. So do you think the social media community united and helped inform this young lady on what it meant?
Oh, I mean, first of all, as a woman on the internet, they get nothing but respect from men and others. So I would think that just out of sheer, I don't know, chivalry, it probably went really well for her. Is that kind of how it went?
No, it was internet chivalry, I guess would maybe be one way to put it. So quoting again from Slang It, instead of providing an answer, TikTokers trolled her by stitching together videos of her enjoying food and asking, "Is it bussin', Janelle?" So
okay, that wasn't too bad, actually.
It wasn't too bad. And I did find one, I didn't want to put TikTok on our show, but it was one where it looked like somebody's dad asked, "Is it bussing, Janelle?" And it was actually pretty funny. So I will give the TikTok community some props for that.
Wow.
And again, as much as we bash on TikTok, we love Sam Ramsdale, world record holder for having the world's largest mouth and former guest. And she's the only TikToker we like until we have somebody else on here from there. So where does bussing come from? So our initial definition said that it came from TikTok in 2019, or pardon me, from a song from Tay Money in 2019. But it's not, I've found some things that predate that. So it's new slang. We've got to go to Urban Dictionary.
Yeah.
And I find the top definition of bussin' comes from December of 2017. And it's thus: bussin', what you would say if something was really good. And I'm going to read the sample sentence that they provide. Tay, I didn't know your mama could cook this good. JJ, yeah, her food be bussin'.
So wait a minute. Tay.
Yeah.
That's another Tay, a different independent Tay. Wow.
Or is it? So we'll see. So Urban Dictionary puts it at 2017. And something I found across several articles looking at the origin of bussin, very similar description that we're going to hear right here. The origins of bussin are not clear, but it has its roots in the Black community. It's Black with a capital B, as a way to complement delectable food. So that's from Slang It. And what you'll find on a lot of these articles about the origin is something about the controversy of bussin. And
really?
It's one of those things that something is marked as controversial, and all the resources you find generally refer to each other.
Yeah, it's like Vulture refers to,
well, not even
Jezebel,
that. Like websites like thelist.com and focus.news. And if you ever do find something, it normally points back to a certain type of credits. But let me give you an example from Slang It.
Please.
Since the roots of bussin go back to the Black community, capital B again, some social media users have criticized non-Black people for co-opting the term and using it for their own purposes. These critics have gone as far to include it in a list of AAVE words off limits to non-Black people. And AAVE, you might ask what that is. That is African American Vernacular English.
So, okay, hold up. I have to comment on this. Mm-hmm. What the hell? If we can't say anything that came from Black culture or sing anything that came from Black, like what the hell? We can't, like we would still sound like, we would still be saying the bee's knees and stuff. Like we'd sound like right out of the 20s.
You and I would probably sound exactly the same. But still, I agree with you on principle that shouldn't be
all the slang we got from the jazz and from the 90s, and I mean, come on. But whatever. Yeah, I'm sure they've got a great point there. We probably should really check ourselves.
Well, that's a couple things. So first, there's these critics, and I like that there's a list of words. Like, and I wonder who's like the holder of the list, like who has like the magic pen that's allowed to write on that. Yeah. So basically, the critics I have found are pretty much what you expect. They're assholes on Twitter. You'll find a reference, the critics, they'll find a reference, some tweet from somebody that doesn't exist anymore that, said that it's a word that shouldn't be used. So it's probably back to our Russian troll friends for doing that. So we've talked about bussin and its origins, maybe not coming exactly from Tay Money, but being popularized by the rapper. So, Scott, I would like you to open the video that I shared with you before.
I'd be happy to.
And let's go for about 15 seconds of this.
All right, let's roll that beautiful bean footage. Give me 1 second. All right, Tay Money. Here we go.
If Drew didn't film it, it ain't film right.
Okay. Ice cold in this bitch. Ice cold in this bitch. What? Don't ask me for nothing if we don't be.
Can I stop it now?
Bitch, she wanted my section. I need a crown and coke.
First of all, she's a Creation ripoff. Creation kicked ass back in like 2008. You know Creation, right? Okay,
I do.
Yeah, she was good. This is horrible.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I stepping on this? Is this? Are you into this?
No. What do you think? You stepped all over my hot take. Of course, she's awful. I feel like I've seen if HPV was a person. I think we've just seen it. So
she's not even that. Okay, never mind. I'm not going to comment on people's looks.
So one of the interesting things I found out of this was that bussin, if it does come from the Black community, which it probably does, Black with a capital B, it's been popularized by Tay Money, who I will give credit for one of her albums or songs, instead of Rapper's Delight, was called Trapper's Delight. And I did find that kind of funny. And also, I think that there's a new hepatitis out there called hepatitis TM that's potentially been unleashed on the world. So bussin, meaning something's really good.
Yeah.
Thumbs up or thumbs down. And I'm gonna let you go first.
Okay, before I go first, I'm going to make a call an audible here and share my favorite Tay of all time, who has nothing to do with the term, but it gives me a chance to bring us back to the good old days of Tay Zonde, who you may or may not remember, but pause for a second.
Please.
Oh, dang it, commercials. You know what? We're going to let it play. I don't care. We'll probably get, you know what? We will get banned for YouTube. All right, here we go. True.
That's a great bank. Let's let that
awesome. One of the great.
Chocolate rain. Some stay dry and others feel the pain. Chocolate rain. A baby born will die before the sin. Chocolate rain.
All right, so it holds up. I'm sorry, it holds up. It was worth watching the commercials in my mind. So Bussin, as far as thumbs up or thumbs down, it's this weird thing where I hear it from my son.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to give it a thumbs up because lately he's been saying it a lot. He only uses it in the terms of food. If something's really good, he says it's bussin'. And ever since the air fryer, let me tell you, a lot of bussin'. I'm hearing that word a lot at my house thanks to the air fryer. So just had to make sure I got my air fryer talk in. But yeah, no, I mean, okay, honestly, the true answer is, I'm gonna be honest, I don't like it. And before you give your, so that's actually, I said thumbs up,
sure,
just because I want to talk about air fryers. I actually don't like it, so it's really thumbs down. That was a pump fake. But before you go on, what do we make of the fact that almost it's not just you, it's both of us, every new slang we do is like a combination of hip hop and TikTok.
Yeah.
And we're not on TikTok and don't listen to a whole lot of hip hop, although I do like Kanye and did vote
Speak for
Kanye.
yourself.
Well, my bad. I know you're into somebody that was maybe on the show. I don't want to spoil it, but I know you've got your rappers that you do like. But it is, like, all kidding aside, it is kind of interesting that, like, it really tells you something about what's going on. I mean, really the TikTok thing. I mean, mine that I did last week, popularized on TikTok. Yeah. And I guess it's just are kids even on Facebook? I'm not even on Facebook. I think Instagram, I don't think anybody cares. We did Finsta, but I think kids are getting off that. Yeah. It really is TikTok. And that's just one bridge I will not go to. So we are officially entering the age of not going to know what the kids are talking about. So with all that long speech, Steve, where did you land on this one?
I wanted to give it a thumbs up just to fight against my normal spiteful self. And the Trapper's Delight thing nearly brought me back.
That was good.
But I got to give it a thumbs down. It just it's unnecessary. And there's no way for me to say it. I don't think it's going to be really hard for anyone, any less white than me, to get away with it without really sounding out of place or like an undercover cop somewhere trying to sound cool with the kids.
Well, and unlike boycott, because I love what you said earlier, because that's a big deal to me too, is like, did we need the word, or are we wedging this word? And do we need another word that means something tastes good? And no, in bussin', I mean, come on, you can do better than that.
Yeah, I agree. All right, 2 thumbs down, it sounds like. And
yeah, boo.
That's our new slang.
So we talked about that boycott is something called an eponym, which, I mean, it makes sense. I know that, like, when somebody does an album that's named after themselves, like they call it the eponymous album. I didn't really know, though, that the term where you name something, so like somebody has a Napoleon complex,
right? That's
an eponym because it's named after an actual person. So I guess you can even say, I'm trying to think of ones we've done just off the top of my head, but jerry-rigged might fall into that category because there really was a Jerry, an actual guy named Jerry. So that counts. A couple good ones. So I'm going to tell you a couple quick good ones and a couple that I wouldn't want to be. And then I'm curious if you have thought about if your name, whether first or last, would turn into an eponym. What would you like it to be? So while you think about that, I mean, right off the bat, America comes from Amerigo Vespucci, map maker.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's, how do you get any better than that you made a few maps. You didn't discover the country, but America was named after you. One that's maybe not as good, Alzheimer's disease, or frankly, any disease. You got your Lou
Right.
Gehrig, you got your Alzheimer's. Alois Alzheimer identified pre-senile dementia and had it named after her. One that's kind of weird, bloomers, the women's garment, I guess underwear, came from women's rights activist Amelia Bloomer, which is interesting to have underwear named after yourself. And I was reading about this. It says it was a type of underwear that was developed in the mid-19th century, more healthy and comfortable than the alternative undergarments of the time. And I really did want to start doing some research on that, but I decided not to.
Yeah.
Another good
yeoldpantyfreak.com or something like that, it would be.
That's the best thing you've ever said. And nobody except for me really gets that.
No.
Diesel, that would be awesome. German French mechanical engineer Rudolf Diesel. That'd be pretty cool.
That is pretty good.
And then another bad one, shrapnel. Henry Shrapnel was a British Army officer and inventor credited with creating the shrapnel shell. And today it refers to pieces of a bomb. That's a bad one. I wouldn't want every time. I mean, has shrapnel ever been used in a positive way? And it's actually a guy's name?
No, I don't think there's any way. I mean, maybe if you're using shrapnel to take out somebody you're fighting,
I guess.
But even then, it's
you missed
a little bit dark, or that you've maimed and crippled somebody that was hit by it.
Yeah. Last one I'll mention, which is what I love, and I've known forever, and I'm sure you have too. Sideburns. The fact that was named after Ambrose Burnside, an American railroad executive, is phenomenal, because just the fact that he wore the hair like that, his name was Burnside, and the hair's on the side of your face. It's kind of like maybe the perfect eponym.
Yeah.
So Steve, what do you think? No pressure if you don't have one.
I mean, I think if there's a way that my bandana style could be immortalized, I think it would probably, though, the downside would be it really should be attributed to the late Peter Bogdanovich, who one day we will spend some time to talk about, who actually was my inspiration to start wearing bandanas. And I also found out he never wore ascots. He actually wore bandanas. There were actually bandanas that he wore. As you know, I purchased some ascots before I found out that fact. And they're still around. I haven't had a chance to really deploy them in any situation. But I think something for that, or maybe something for having an obnoxious hairstyle that you think you only wear during the podcast, but your hair, at some point in the day, if the humidity changes, ends up looking this way. So what about you? What are some things about you?
Man, I really thought about this, because I'm like, do I go self-deprecating? Do I go something grandiose? Mm-hmm. And actually, I landed somewhat similar to you with appearance, and thought it could have something to do with like, this guy's got a McGinnis complex, which is like an older guy who maybe has a fat face and wears a beard to kind of cover up the weak chin. So instead of the Napoleon complex, being a short guy trying to compensate, it's a guy with no chin trying to compensate. So I guess I did go the self-deprecating route, or anything with cheese, because I do love cheese.
Cheese is awesome. That is good. Well, imagine a world without cheese. I think that would be good to be associated with cheese.
Right. Can you put out a McGinnis platter, and everybody knows it's like cheese and maybe some Guinness beer or something. All right, let's get into the last term for today, which is hillbilly. Hillbilly, man. I love hillbilly. I love the word hillbilly. Merriam-Webster defines it as, well, first of all, they have to make sure to put at the top that it's often disparaging and offensive. Mm-hmm. And it's a very simple definition on Merriam-Webster, which just says a person from a backwoods area. So then you got to decide what that means. But historically, I have loved using that term to denigrate someone that I didn't like, who I felt was sort of, a little backwards in their thinking, or they're a little, not just thinking, but they're just kind of not with the times. Mm-hmm. not that there's anything really inherently wrong with that, but it's really fun to call someone a hillbilly.
It is. It's tremendous fun. And you can get away with it. There's no repercussions for it. You can throw that out at anybody and you're fine. And it's fun to say. It comes off the tongue well.
Yep.
You can say it, and I can say it like really mean, like when I mean it too. Like, you know, someone's a hillbilly. I can just really put a little venom on it, but it's still kind of funny sounding at the same time. It's the best of everything.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because honestly, like I get no satisfaction as much as we did honky and cracker. If I call someone a honky, it's like, it's not satisfying at all. Yeah. It's like, whatever. Now, speaking of racial slurs and speaking of honky and cracker, doing my research today, I have to kind of make a little change here to my own preferred racial slur because remember, this is the St. Patrick's Day episode, hillbilly. Mm-hmm. Well, why in the world, when I think hillbilly, you know, I think a banjo and squeal like a pig or whatever. Mm-hmm. But as I got into it, but by the way, the article I'm referring to today is the West Virginia Gazette article. And you should see the author. Seems like a good dude. Looks like a hillbilly.
Yeah.
But he goes on to talk about it. And it's mostly used to describe the country folk of Appalachia, or Appalachia, if you will. And so that's where my people are from. The Scotch Irish, and specifically, and it's funny because I was just talking to my dad about this. I was with him this last weekend, and I did that thing that every once in a while I do where I'm like, where are we from? And he'll give me the same answer, and I'll be like, oh, yeah. And then I'll probably forget again because it's so long ago. But my people were Scotch Irish, and which is Scottish people that immigrated to northern parts of Ireland and were some of the first settlers to the United States. So I really like to think of myself as American, even though I have a comically on the nose Irish name, if you knew my full name, which I will not give out. But yeah, so they're kind of my people. And I had said before, okay, you're the honky, I'm the cracker. Mm-hmm. You can still be the honky, but I'm not really a cracker. I was born in Georgia, but my people are from Appalachia. So I think maybe I'm the hillbilly because it is the Scotch Irish folk. So now I said it's Scotch Irish. It comes from Scotch Irish, but why? What is hillbilly? Well, there's a couple main theories. So let me give you the two main theories here. The first theory is that many of the early settlers to the 13 colonies were from Scotland and Northern Ireland and were followers of William of Orange, Protestant King of England, in 17th century England during the Williamite War, which is fun to say. Mm-hmm. Protestant supporters of William III, sometimes referred to as King Billy, were referred to as Billy's boys. Mm. So in time, the term hillbilly became synonymous with the Williamites who settled in the Appalachian Hills of North America. And this is the rare, like, there's not really, I can't shoot this down. Yeah. Some scholars believe this, but others don't. And a lot of others don't. And one of those is Michael Quinion from Worldwide Words. And therefore I will be on his side. And he said, he doubts this idea of the supporters of William of Orange, aka Billy's boys. And here's why. He said the word Billy, of which hillbilly is a compound, of course, is an English word that goes back to the early 16th century at least, which at first meant friend or comrade. So Billy meant a friend or comrade. And later, any male person, it's kind of like saying a fellow. This Billy, kind of like saying a fellow. Hillbilly, in the sense of a rustic person, is first is attested only at the very end of the 19th century, and if it had been connected with King Billy, it ought to have appeared much earlier, he said. So that leads us to the other theory, and probably the one that Michael Quinion would be more likely to believe. He sort of started going down this road. So in Scotland, the term hill folk referred to people who like to live in isolation instead of the larger societies. That kind of fits with hillbilly, right? Hill folk. And then Billy did mean comrade or companion. So you put hill folk and Billy together, you combine that, and they actually got applied to a group I'd never heard of, the Cameronians, which honestly, I just watched Aliens the other night. I might be a James Cameronian, because have you? Sorry, this has nothing to do. I don't know if you've watched that lately.
I did. I watched Alien and Aliens within the last 6 months, and they're both incredible movies and very different too.
Very different, right? So the first one is like, I would call it a horror movie, and it's terrifying. The second one is like one of the greatest action movies you'll ever see.
Yep.
After I watched Aliens, because I did the same thing, it must be on some service that we both subscribe to. I was like, I don't know if I could pick which one is better, but they are so different. So I might be a James Cameronian. I even looked it up, and they're both like 99 on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
But not in this case. In this case, these Cameronians follow the teachings of a militant Presbyterian named Richard Cameron. And they fled the hills of southern Scotland in the late 17th century because they didn't want to be persecuted for their beliefs. And where do you go when you want religious freedom? America. And they immigrated to Appalachia. So, it's either Billy's Boys supporting William of Orange, which probably doesn't work out timing wise, or it's probably the Cameronians who were also fleeing and Scotch Irish folks that came, well, really Scottish folks, but same deal. They all had to come through. The term hillbilly spread big time after the American Civil War. So, and here's why. At the time, the country was developing, like technologically and socially, but the Appalachian region was falling behind. So before the war, pretty much everybody was everybody was kind of a little backwoods. So Appalachia was not distinctively different than anywhere else in the country. Post-war, the frontier pushed farther west, but Appalachia sort of stayed the same. So over time, they became more perceived as backwards, quick to violence, and inbred in their isolation, fueled by news stories of mountain feuds like the Hatfields and McCoys. The hillbilly stereotype really set in the late 19th century to the early 20th century. So the classic hillbilly archetype that you think of now, if like I say hillbilly, you get a picture in your head. That was really crystallized during the Great Depression. So what happened after the Great Depression was you saw a lot of the Appalachian folks start to migrate to cities like in the North and Midwestern industrial cities like Chicago and Cleveland and Detroit. The movement, I had to include this because this movement of these hillbillies moving out to bigger cities was referred to as the Hillbilly Highway.
Again, fun to say.
It is fun to say. So all that because I had to say the Hillbilly Highway. So it brought the hillbillies from Appalachia into new communities, and in response, the folks that I guess in the bigger cities really started, I guess how we would say today, kind of roasting. They became the butt of all sorts of pamphlets, comic books, characters, and you see it in the film and TV that would come out later. But then you'd also see historical sort of inspirational figures like Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone, who would also fall into this category. So the hillbilly stereotype lives on. And I guess my big takeaway from this is that I won't feel, and I mean this really, I can't call people hillbillies anymore as a bad thing, because I do feel like it kind of ruined it for me knowing that it's Scotch Irish people that my family literally is from Appalachia. Like we know that. I mean, they still, most of my family still lives in Kentucky, or cousins and things like that too. So I don't think I can use it as much as a derogatory term as I used to, but I now guess I could say I identify as a hillbilly.
I've been there. I've been in a situation just 6 months ago when Jans Papas helped me realize that I was actually Belgian Mongolian. So it takes a little while to adjust. I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult for you because it just makes you somehow became whiter, which I didn't know was possible, that you could be more of a Caucasian than you are already. Yeah. But I will help you adjust because I love calling people hillbilly. It'll give me a chance.
Oh, good. Call me.
You can. Yeah, I can do that to you, and the beard's not helping either. So, I mean, I'll be able to kind of just add on a few things to that. But on a more serious note, I highly recommend a book I read a few years ago about the Scotch Irish, Born Fighting, How the Scots Irish Shaped America, by former Virginia Senator Jim Webb.
I will check that out.
Excellent book. Will make you feel better about your status as a hillbilly. And as we're, joking around a little bit, when the poo hits the fan, no one's saying, you know what I need right now? I need somebody, I need to go get a keyboard commando off Twitter to help me, fight back against whatever is happening. The hillbillies will have their day. And
you get the hillbillies over to Ukraine if we could somehow get in that airspace. Sorry to bring it down. But I mean, honestly, that's who you want fighting on your side are the hillbillies. So this was our St. Patrick's Day episode. We really didn't talk about leprechauns or anything like that, but Steve and I will be taking a couple weeks off for, I guess, just to celebrate St. Patrick's Day and maybe recuperate as well. And Steve, our resident t-shirt designer, just had an idea for another t-shirt, and it can only be in green, and it has a shamrock on it and just says hillbilly. What do you think, man?
I think you should check it out at speaksies.com/store.
I love that. All right. Well, Steve, I think we've gotten through everything I wanted to. So if you're ready, why don't you take us home?
I am. Thank you very much for listening to Origin of Speaksies. If you enjoyed the show, please help us spread the word by liking, commenting, subscribing on YouTube. Also doing the same thing on Rumble Video. You can also leave us a positive review and 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. And for more great content and to directly support our show, become a Speaksies supporter at patreon.com/Speaksies. Any amount of support provides you access to all the bonus content available. We have options for every budget. Get you access to other Speaksies shows like Speaksies Uncut and 3 Silly Questions. And also helps support us, helps us stay on the air, and finances are costly. And you are truly a patron when you support us at patreon.com/Speaksies. Again, that's patreon.com/Speaksies.
That's what I'm talking about, and Bob's your uncle.
Watch out for bears, especially you hillbilly, and killers from the dump.
Speaksies.